Thank you, Director Swagel. Starting on Ms. Shankowski's point regarding illegal immigration, your testimony is that the more people that are working, the greater the economic output. So on the macro level, that registers as an increase in economic activity, correct?
That's correct, yes.
But since illegal immigrants are generally lower wage workers, and we're flooding the labor market with them, what does that do to the wages for working Americans?
No, that's right, that the new immigrants will tend to go into industries that have relatively low productivity that will lower the level of productivity for the country as a whole and lead to lower wages on average.
Lower wages for working families.
That's right.
So the party that keeps touting itself as the friend of the worker actually is advocating policies that are suppressing the wages of working Americans by flooding the labor market now with more than 5 million illegal immigrants that their administration has released into this country, which I find absolutely appalling. Now, and because the illegal immigrants are generally lower wage earners, they pay relatively lower taxes and consume relatively higher government services. The Center for Immigration Studies estimates that on average, the net lifetime cost of an illegal immigrant is $69,000. That's per person. That's the costs consumed minus the taxes paid. It's a net loss of $69,000 per individual. Do you have any reason to question that estimate?
So it's something that we're still working on, is looking at the composition of the immigrants and the trajectory of their work profiles, and the benefits they would draw.
But there's no reason, at least at this point, not to expect that every illegal immigrant who is admitted into this country is a net cost to American taxpayers and is suppressing the wages of working Americans. Thank you, party of the workers. Let's go to Mr. Doggett's point regarding taxes. Tax Foundation reports that the top 1% of income earners earn 20% of all income, roughly, but pay 40% of all income taxes. Are those figures in the ballpark?
Yes, our tax system is sharply progressive in the way that you're saying between.
So they earn 20% of the income, they pay 40% of the income taxes. So if you're actually arguing that they should pay their fair share, you're actually arguing to cut their taxes in half, it sounds to me, which is a rather bizarre position for the Democrats to take. And what we found in California and a number of other very high-tax states is that Arthur Laffer was right, that there's nothing more portable in this world than money and rich people. When taxes reach a certain point, what happens to tax revenues?
As you said, people can move across borders, and that's something that we see when we look at state and local issues.
And that's why we see high-tax states like California, the more they raise their taxes, the more their tax revenues go down. In fact, when the Trump tax cuts took effect, the projection was that they'd reduce total revenues, but our total revenues actually went up after the tax cuts, not down. So how do you explain that?
No, that's right. So the challenge of making that evaluation is in terms of the event subsequent to the Tax Act. And we expected that to increase growth. It's just hard to distill the impact of the Tax Act from the,
But in this case, what we saw was taxes were cut, revenues went up. Now we're at about 17.5% of GDP on our revenues right now, according to your report. Now, isn't that about average for the post-war era?
That's right. The 17.5 we have this year is slightly above the 17.3.
And the highest amount that we've ever brought in the post-war era was in 1945. That was 19.8%. Now, Truman then cut spending, cut taxes dramatically, and between 1945 and 1950, we saw revenue decline to 13.1% of GDP, but the result was the post-war economic boom. Is that also about right?
No, that's right. After the adjustment after World War II, as you said, we had an economic boom in the 50s.
I just want to tag on one other point that was just raised regarding housing. When something's scarce, it's expensive. When it's plentiful, it's cheap. What impact have rent controls had on the supply of rental housing historically?
Generally, that kind of policy would tend to reduce the construction of new housing and supply.
And therefore force up prices, not to mention 100,000 per home mandates, as we're seeing in California, zoning restrictions that constrict the supply of housing, and delays of years and years that add enormously to the holding costs for developers. So all of those are self-inflicted wounds by government, are they not?
No, that's right. And these are state and local issues generally, and the zoning that you pointed to is a key issue in the supply of housing.
I thank the gentleman from California.